Welcome, everyone, to this conversation on building value-centered technology. My name is Kellen Klein, and I'm the course manager at the Center for Humane Technology, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Vlada, co-founder and CEO of Marco Polo. I'm really excited about this conversation because a lot of our prior conversations that we've had within our Foundations course community have been with various advocates, thought leaders, policy makers that are focused on the humane technology movement. But this is really our first opportunity to hear how the sausage gets made, to get into the weeds of actually building technology with someone who has done so and been wildly successful doing so. So Vlada, thank you so much for being here. I think we should go ahead and dive right into the conversation and get started. Thank you so much.
Hold on. First, I have to say thank you for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure.
I'm so excited to be here. This topic is so dear to my heart and to all the people who work at Marco Polo. So to be able to speak about it to this community that I know is so aligned with what we want in the world and how we want to show up, it just feels like really a blessing. So thanks for including me.
Well, the feeling is mutual. We're equally excited, it sounds like. Well, I don't want to introduce yourself. I'd love to have you introduce yourself. Or I don't want to introduce you. I'd love to have you introduce yourself. Why don't we start by zooming back a little bit, not focusing on Marco Polo, but tell us about you. What are the values and lived experience that have been most impactful on your work as an entrepreneur and technologist? What really got you into the technology space in the first place?
My name is Vlada.
That's a good place to start.
What does an intro usually look like? I hate introducing myself, so I'm grateful for a question like that instead. So I was born in Ukraine and I immigrated to the US and at the very end of 1990, actually on Christmas Day. And I think that immigration story actually really shaped my life in many ways, probably even more than I'm realizing or I'm aware of right now. But one of the things that I saw was just how hard my parents worked and how hard they worked at. They had a vision, they had a dream for what it would be like to move to US, to escape the persecution they were experiencing in Ukraine because I'm Jewish. So they had this like American dream and they just worked relentlessly towards it and made it happen. And then even when we came to the US, this notion of focusing on the dream, no matter how big and audacious it was, and making it happen and doing it the right way. When we came to US, we didn't have any money at all. We had to leave because we left really short notice and had to leave everything behind. Like I just remember closing the door to our apartment and saying, okay, I'll never see my stuff again. Wow. And, my parents never wanted to take advantage of any like systems here. Like they had 2 or 3 jobs all the time. They tried learning English. Like they really wanted to do it the right way too. And I think that's really ingrained in how like I see the world, and I'm not scared to dream big, like really audaciously big, and doing it the right way has been really important to me as well. And then following that, like coming to the US during my middle school years, I immigrated to Kansas, and in Kansas, I think there weren't that many people coming from Ukraine. It was more or less a similar culture between the people. So people weren't used to somebody who looked like me, who had my name. I had super short hair. There was like an afro. I didn't know you're supposed to change clothes every day. Like that's just not something we did. So like little things like this, I was bullied quite a lot. And it wasn't until high school that I stood up to my bully and told him basically to stop. And he never bullied me since. But that experience, I think, really taught me that I can do hard things. Like I can get through stuff. I can get through hardships. And, that's an important piece of being an entrepreneur, because there are definitely these ups and downs. And then I was fortunate enough to work at Microsoft, where I got to see that you can really come up with an idea and make it happen and release it into the hands of millions of people and then get feedback. And the magic of that was just like, oh my God, technology could be really magical. Like really was like another spark in me. And then lastly, my family, working, Mihai, who's my husband and co-founder, he and I met when we were at Microsoft, and we started a nonprofit together, and just what it was like to work with him and seeing how together we get to dream even bigger and make our dreams come to fruition was so much fun that I was really hooked. And then, as soon as we had our kids, like they're actually the inspiration behind Marco Polo, what we do, because they really push us to think not just what we want to do, but how we want the world to be for them and what kind of life we want to model for them. So anyway, so all those things coming together sort of made me who I am today.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sure there's a lot of elements there that a lot of folks from our global community can relate to, whether it's being an immigrant or being from not as much of, at least I guess, of a Western country, to being a parent, to working in the technology space. And it's beautiful to see how those all sort of bring you down this funnel to Marco Polo. And you said that having kids was really the inflection point where suddenly it was crystallized in terms of what you wanted to build, it sounds like, and how you wanted to build it. Why don't we jump into that? Tell us about what specifically inspired Marco Polo, and then maybe you can sort of lead into what the app actually does and what Marco Polo does.
Yeah. So when Miha and I started having a family, when I was pregnant with our oldest daughter, we started asking ourselves these questions that I think every parent asks, like, what do we want for them? How do we want the world to be? And how, like, what role can we play in that? And previously, we were actually working in an advertising company. Like, we actually had another company that was an ed tech. And what we knew for sure is that what we wanted more than anything is to work on something that was really purposeful, something that really mattered. And for us, at the same time as we were kind of starting our family, and by the time we had her, like, we realized that happiness is the thing that was the most important in life. Like, if you ask anybody, what do you want for your kids? You just want them to be happy. Yeah. So my husband is computer science major from Harvard. I'm computer engineering and double major from Northwestern. I think we're audacious enough to think that we can actually engineer happy kids by just diving into the happiness research and like pulling it apart. And the thing that kept coming up just so consistently was how important relationships are to happiness. Mm-hmm. And it's not just like a nice to have, it is a fundamental need. And then we looked at our lives and what's happening in the world and how hard it was to stay in touch with our family. Like, we really wanted our kids to be part of our family's life in a way that video calls was like a once a week kind of scheduled thing at the time. And it really mostly became a chore because like a call with his mom, a call with his dad, with his parents, like our weekends were gone. And, you know, text messaging is not the same and social media is not the same either. Like, we really wanted a way for them to feel close. And there was nothing like that in the market. So before we actually had an idea, which I think is a pretty unusual thing for most companies, the way we got started is with a purpose. We started with a purpose of helping people feel close. And so we actually iterated a few times before we got to Marco Polo, but this purpose has really been a North Star. And so what Marco Polo is, I'll tell you that most people that use Marco Polo will describe it as a lifeline, which is something
that's flattering, right?
Say it again.
That's got to be flattering for you. That's got to feel really good.
Yeah, it's something I'm incredibly proud of. And then you start asking them, okay, but what is it? And people start stumbling because it's really actually very hard to describe what Marco Polo is until you experience the magic of it. But what I can tell you is when you experience Marco Polo, the result is you start feeling closer to people in your life in a way that you didn't think was possible. It's sort of, we start erasing the time and the distance, and it makes you feel like the people you love the most are in your pocket and you can reach out to them anytime. So that's how I like to describe Marco Polo. I think if I was to get really tactical or technical at the very surface level, it is a way for you to send video messages back and forth, or some people would say it's a video chat app. But the beauty of it is that you can send it on your own time. Yeah. Whenever you want. There's no limits. There's no pretense. There's no bunny filters. So you can really, like, we do everything we can for you to just be you. Like, this is me talking to the people I love, feeling heard, being seen. Yeah, so and there's no ads. We don't sell your data. I'm sure you'll be asking me questions about that.
We're getting more into that, but I'm glad you brought it up. And that was a good teaser. So I put the link to Marco Polo in the chat if anyone has not seen it yet. It's like, you have to experience it. Oh, and by the way, here's a link. So
and it's a free app. So it really is, like I said, our model is we have a subscription model for a plus features, convenience features, but the base app is free. So I hope you use it and give me feedback.
Yes, feedback always welcome. We're big fans of that over here at CH as well. So you talked about the origin story, and you talked about really starting with a purpose and like a positive purpose. You wanted to have an impact on the world. And in our course, Foundations of Humane Technology, we introduced these 6 core tenets of humane technology, and one of them is centering values. And that really sounds like, or that's the one that jumped out to me the most when we were having our prep calls and just learning about Marco Polo. You were starting with values and impacts that you wanted to have in the world, and then figuring out how to manifest those through the technology that you were building. And some of the things that you mentioned already was like fostering human connection. You also talk about ensuring user trust, protecting user data, and you mentioned the ad-based model. Can you talk more about some of the nuances of actually building technology to align with those values? Like what were some of the key decisions that you made to build connections or to ensure happiness or to ensure user trust and protecting data? Can you elaborate on those a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think our purpose of helping people feel close really has been, it's our North Star. And it is actually not just our purpose, it's one of our values, that everybody in the company is purpose driven. Like it is a thing that is energizing us to do our best work. And it is a thing that we're willing to do anything for to make a difference in the world. And because that purpose is so clear and so woven into everything that we do, it is just top of mind for everybody in the company to be asking that question.
It sounds like it's almost like a filter to, like, when you're hiring people, you're looking for that
absolutely
first and foremost.
Yeah.
You don't want people who are just coming to work for a standard 9 to 5 or a paycheck. You want people that are really feeling invested in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so it's actually a filter for who are our investors.
That's a good point.
Every investor in our company and our board are somebody who believes in our purpose. And we start every board deck with our slide of this is our purpose and a testimonial from our community of this is what the purpose means to this group of people and why what we're doing is so important for the world. The purpose is definitely a filter for anybody who works on Marco Polo. Like I interview everybody still, and that is definitely a filter I put on. And I tell everyone that if this purpose does not get you out of bed excited, this is not the right place for you, because we talk about our purpose all the time. And the expectation really is that everybody understands that how their work ties into the greater purpose. And if they don't, the culture we've set up is that you ask, can you help me understand why we're doing this and how this connects to this bigger thing that we're doing? And so as a result, we do have these conversations and we do have these debates, and we do make sure that we adjust as needed, because people will see things like I have blind spots. Everybody can have blind spots, but if everybody in the company understands the North Star, then there's a higher chance that we'll be guided towards that North Star and not get distracted by some other shiny object. So I think having a really clear purpose and talking about it all the time, like weekly stand-ups, we talk about it, we share testimonials on a weekly basis. All the decks started with that. So like really, I'm not kidding. Like if you don't care about our purpose, you will not like it, because we talk about it all the time.
Well, that's such a good reminder though. Like before you even get to actually building anything, you need to build a organizational culture and an ethos and like a communications framework that's really built around those values and that purpose that you're trying to elicit in the world. So that's a great reminder for anyone who's trying to start their own purpose-driven companies, that you really need to start with, the purpose and the values of the team that you're building before you can start to embed those in the technology itself. That's
right. And then part of that, we've sort of like intuitively, but now we make it even more explicit. We have this like almost brand promise of building technology that's good for you. And so there's a common knowledge that what we're trying to do in the world is like, we can't reach our purpose without this fundamental belief that our technology is good for you. Because like, if we're asking you to feel close, that means you have to be vulnerable. You have to be you. So that means we have to create a place that feels really safe for you to be you. And everybody in the company knows that as well. And so we have conversations and debates around those topics as well. And I think I shared with you that we actually started doing research on this. So
yes, let's segue into that, because when we talk about, like actually building something that's value centered, you need to have ways to measure what success looks like. We talk in our course about being metrics informed, but values driven. So maybe we can dive into like, okay, how do you actually measure that success in the first place?
Yeah. So for me, I'm an engineer. And so for me, metrics are really important. It is one thing to say that you're going to do good in the world, or do you do what is it? Do no evil, or whatever your purpose is, but it's another thing to actually measure that you're doing this. And so I'm a huge believer of holding ourselves accountable. And yes, I can have the best intentions possible, but I'm human, I make mistakes. So let's measure ourselves to make sure that we are going in the right direction.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, we started actually holding ourselves accountable and measuring the impact we have both on the happiness of the community that's using Marco Polo, and then also how we're doing it against our purpose. Are we actually helping people feel close? And so, last result was that 90% of people who used Marco Polo after 2 weeks felt closer to the people that were using it before.
And are you learning this just
people they're talking to before?
Are you learning this just through surveys that you solicit from users, or how are you measuring that?
Yeah. So what we did for this last group, we asked 100 people to switch from using text to using Marco Polo for 2 weeks. And we asked them these survey questions. We also asked them to do video journaling, and we had some qualitative research with them. And we asked them to also measure their mood before using Marco Polo and after using Marco Polo.
Okay, so this was pretty rigorous. You were like coordinating entire studies explicitly to measure these things. It wasn't.
Oh, yes. So, and we work with a third party to do this.
Got it. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool that you were able to do that.
So what we found, like I said, not just the 90% of people felt closer after just 2 weeks, but also their mood was better. Like on average, their mood was higher. And what's really interesting is on days where their mood was particularly low, Marco Polo had the greatest impact.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think like intuitively it makes sense because Marco Polo is about face-to-face, and sometimes I'll maybe cheesily call it heart-to-heart connection.
Yeah.
And so when I see somebody I love dearly who might be far away or just really busy, and I see their face, like everything gets, kind of like my body reacts to that. Like people will say they get a push notification and it's like, oh my gosh, I get a gift, because it's not your 1,000 friends you have on a social network, right? It's your maybe 10, 5, 10, 20 people that you actually want to see. It's like the people that, if they came to town, you'd go out to dinner with them, or would they call it, anyway, so.
It's quality over quantity in terms of relationship building.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think I've shared this with you before, but I really believe that about 10 years ago, we as humanity have made this almost like unconscious trade-off. Like we chose to switch from having these face-to-face conversations, or having conversations actually, to this text-based medium between social networks and text messaging, that we sort of start prioritizing efficiency and quantity over the quality of the connection. And all the research says that it's the quality that matters. And so no wonder 10 years later, we're seeing what's happening to our society. I really think that the bonds, like the basic human bonds, are being broken because there's not enough conversation. There's not enough actual closeness. So I can go on by that for a long time.
You're reminding me of some recent work from Jonathan Haidt that we've been talking about internally, and the article that has been gone kind of viral in the Atlantic about why the past 10 years of American life have been uniquely stupid, I think was the title of it, but talking about the inflection point that happened about 10 years ago, largely caused by social media, and how it led to that quantity over quality type of relationship and community building. I want to circle back for a second, just a little bit more to like measuring values and measuring impact. 2 questions. One, not every startup or founder or entrepreneur or even well-established platform probably is going to have the financial capacity to organize their own third-party studies to measure the positive or negative impact that they're having and assess how it's aligned with their values. Do you have any suggestions for like how you can start measuring that impact from day one and creating metrics that aren't directly tied to profit, growth, engagement, sort of the stereotypical metrics that are often used within the technology space? I'll start there and then I'll pivot to my next question.
Yeah, sure. I sort of think that's a BS excuse.
Okay.
I'm going to push back.
No sugarcoating it here. All right.
I'm not sugarcoating it because we're a startup. We're a small startup. Like,
how big are you now? How big is Marco Polo?
We're about 50 people. Like, we're not that big, you know?
Definitely.
And I think what's most important is actually that you start heading down the direction. The reality is probably a year from now, I'm going to look back on the study and be like, oh, we messed it up in all these different ways. This is how I could have done it better. Our first study, we started with 20 people. And it was much less rigorous. The idea is like just to start measuring. You can always, like, if you don't measure it, you don't know where you are, and you can't know that you're getting better. You can't know that you're improving. So any startup can create a Google form and send an email to their community and just ask them some survey questions. It doesn't have to be third party. It doesn't have to be that rigorous. You could just do it yourself. Just like people do NPS scores, you can just start asking the question. You can even start so simple as telling your board that this is something that's really important to me. Or if you're not a founder, you're just somebody working at a company, you can raise your question to all hands and saying like, how do we know that technology that we're building is not harming our people? If more people were just asking questions, that will lead to more people thinking creative about different solutions. How could we be measuring?
That's such a great point. That's
exactly. And
right.
I just think like we just can't. I mean, like, and you see this trends in so many different places, like with food industry, right? Like it used to be they just ate whatever. And then there was a demand from the consumers. Consumers rose up and said like, hey, I want to know what goes into my freaking food. Like put some labels on it. And now we can choose, like, I love Snickers ice cream bars. So sometimes I will devour Snickers ice cream bar. But, you know that if I eat it, there will be corn syrup and there'll be sugar and da. So I might not choose to eat that every day. I can choose to eat a salad or something else that's healthier, but I'm given that choice. In technology right now, there's no choice. Like we're not given that choice. We're sort of just being given these tools that are highly addictive. I think there's a lot of data says it's highly addictive, and there's no information about the harm that it's causing to our bodies. And it's actually causing us harm. And so I think that everybody on the call, everybody in the world has a role to play, because together we can rise up, we can demand more, accountability, and we can change. I think we can change things. We can change the industry in a way that we can't even imagine right now.
Bold words and powerful and inspiring words too. And I love the idea of nutrition labels for technology and the products we're building. And just going back to your own point, I just want to like reemphasize to our course community that sort of proactive mindset in terms of starting small, but beginning to measure impact or creating measurements or metrics that are really aligned with your values from the get-go is so much more impactful and effective than like trying to grow and get to a certain size and saying, okay, we'll deal with the impact down the line once we get to a point where we know that we're financially viable. It can be really hard to reel it back in once you get to that point, or to pivot away from these priorities around growth or revenue or engagement. Once you get to a certain size and you kind of have the wheels moving in that particular direction, it can be really hard to pivot and say, okay, now let's bring in impact, because we know that we're going to be around for the long haul. So I love that point, Vlada, about really starting from the beginning and making sure that it is deeply ingrained while you were trying to do the growing.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it also sets expectations across the board for what kind of company you are. And what are you okay with, or what are you not okay with? And the earlier you are, the easier it is for you to pivot. So let's say right now Facebook perhaps is realizing advertising might not be the best, but I don't know. If let's say they realize that advertising is not the best business model for the health of the people who are using Facebook, they can't just pivot. They're too big. It's going to be almost impossible for them to tell all their investors and all the people who bought their shares that, by the way, we're going to leave all this profit on the table because now we care about this thing. You got to start small. You got to start at the beginning and just hammer that point in at every chance you have, so people know what they can expect from you. And then they're not surprised that you're walking away, which we have walked away from things because this is our North Star. This is what matters.
It's a lot easier to turn a speedboat than it is to turn a cruise ship or an oil tank.
Yes.
Large
I like that.
vessel, if you want to use as the metaphor. But I feel like this also really ties well into one of the challenges that I've heard from people within our course community, which is it's so hard to attract investors and be profitable when we're building humane technology that isn't solely focused on those metrics that we alluded to earlier. It sounds like you've been able to attract investors because of your purpose and just, whether because of or in spite of putting your purpose and those values up front and forward, first and foremost, above all these other more traditional growth metrics. What has that experience been like, and how do you make the business case for humane technology? Yeah,
I think there's maybe a few ways I'm gonna attack that question. Attack sounds like so harm. So I'm gonna answer that question. That's a better way of saying it.
Okay, you can answer a different question if you prefer to.
Say it again.
You can answer a different question, or you can rewrite that question and pose it to yourself if you prefer.
No, I like that question because I do think that there is some truth in it, but I think it starts with the founder first. As a founder, you have to decide what is most important to you. And I say that because Marco Polo is not our first company. We've had other companies before. So I've had the benefit of learning. And again, because it started at the same time as we started family, sort of like our kids were the catalyst.
Mm.
I mean, I know as I'm saying this, it might sound super cheesy, but I just like, Miha and I were so grounded with what was important to us.
Yeah.
And it was like this purpose and doing it the right way. We were truly not in it for anything other than changing the world. Like we really just want to change the world in a positive way. And that meant that we looked for specific investors. We didn't like optimize for the highest possible valuation we could get or the most money we could personally make. Like we really looked at who are the investors that we think will be the right fit for this, which I think is really important. It can be scary, like potentially like not going after brand names VCs or going after specific brand name VCs. You know, like there's all these things that I think play into it. The other thing is being honest at the pitching table, saying like, this is what we're about. This is what's really important to us. And what I can promise you is going to be an amazing journey. And we're going to do this together. But I think the thing that worked in huge favor for us is we're not here to play small. Like when I say that I want Marco Polo to change the world, I am not sugarcoating it. I am here to be big. I'm here to make a big difference in the entire world. I think we can do it. I can't do it myself. I need all of you on the call to play a role in this. Marco Polo is just a piece of the puzzle. What we're trying to enable is the next wave, like the next, I'm getting chills, I'm saying this, but like you all are part of this momentum that's happening right now. And we all have a role to play to change the freaking world. You know, and I think that the investors who invest in us, like see the passion and see how much we want to make a difference. Like I want to get 1 billion people benefiting from Marco Polo. That's the kind of vision that investors can align with. And so when I say that, and the way we're going to do it is the right way. As much as we can, we're going to make mistakes along the way because who knows what right is. Nobody sets out to do it the wrong way. But if we measure it along the way with pivot, we'll get there eventually. And another thing is we're not committed to like 3 years, 5 years. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing it for 10 years. Like, and I'm committed. Yeah. You know, I'm here for the long game. And so I think combination of those things is what inspired the investors that we have to invest in us and to believe in us. Even 10 years later, they're still all in on what we're trying to do in the world. And they see that if we succeed, they'll have the returns. That's not a problem. Like any company that gets to 1 billion people has the revenue and the returns and the profits, right? So the main thing is to not lose focus on what you're here to do.
So I want to follow up on that briefly, because I think a lot of folks have struggled to know where to look for more ethical investors or investors that are willing to do the long play or willing to embed those values into their investments as well. How did you go about searching for those investors or finding the ones that you felt would be most aligned with your values?
Yeah, so I mean, over the last 10 years, I think the VC industry has changed quite a bit. And they actually are some firms that are specifically for, like around this area. Like I know Wisdom Ventures started. I don't know if they're actually already funded fully and all stuff, but like as an example, Wisdom Ventures is a community of investors that's specifically focused on this topic. So that would be a great resource for y'all. But also word of mouth, like connecting with founders who are working on companies that you believe in, or nonprofits that might have people who have invested in them and asking them who invested in them, and sort of word of mouth has been like the best way. And of course, there's also, if you in the news, like reading about investors who might say the thing that kind of gets the spark in your heart going, and not being afraid to reach out and connecting with them. I think those are some of the ways that you could try. That's
great advice. We list some of these investors in at the end of a deck that we did on careers in humane tech. If you go to, I drop the link in humanetech.com/careers. If you go to the last page in the embedded slide deck on that page, you'll see a list of some of these other venture funds and investors similar to Wisdom Ventures that you mentioned. Shout out to Be Kind Tech Fund as well, who also has some some staff members that have been taking our course as well. So
awesome. But I think when you are taking money, it is a sort of a marriage. I mean, people describe it, and it is true, because there is this expectation that you're going to be doing this for a long time. And if you're going to be working with this person through the ups and downs, and believe me, there'll be lots of downs as there'll be ups, you got to know who you're getting yourself into. So don't be afraid to ask the hard questions like, what's the longest investment you've held? Why did you hold it that long? Like,
Mm.
What happens when there's these choices? Like, how do you participate in those conversations? Do you participate in those conversations? Like, all those questions can be scary, because I know how much everybody wants to raise the money,
Yeah.
but making their own decision on investor is something you'll pay the price for so long, that I really encourage you to take the time to really get to know them. Like, go out for lunch with them, have a coffee, or whatever your drink of choice is. And
it's the same advice that I've heard for and given to people doing career searches, right? Like, you're interviewing them as like to see if you're a good fit for them as much as they're interviewing you to see if they're on their team, right? And so doing that with investors, especially when there's potentially a longer relationship than there is for even a next step in your career journey, I think is a really great point to make, and probably also sends a signal to them about what your values are and how you are hoping to work with them that can be really positive.
Yes, and the last thing I'll say on that is do reference checks. Like, I usually spend, like, when we have the offers on the table, I'll spend a whole day reference checking. Literally.
That's great.
Just on calls and asking people who've had good experiences or bad experiences. Like, reference checks are so critical.
That's a really good point. I want to leave time for audience Q&A here in just a moment as well. I've had some good questions coming in, and a lot of comments in the chat as well. I dropped in a link for Be Kind Tech Fund as well. Shout out to Carolina for giving us that information that I could circulate out. I realize that y'all can't necessarily see each other's commentary in the chat right now, I don't think. Sorry about that. All right, Vlada, I'm going to leave you with one more question, and then we'll turn to audience Q&A. Actually, no, I'm going to do two questions. The first, and you've already given a ton of great advice, but do you have any additional advice for fellow aspiring humane technologists and entrepreneurs? Just some pithy things that they can, put up on the wall above their computer when they're trying to build something.
I think the biggest is, like, be hopeful, stay hopeful, and be active. Don't let all the reasons that we shouldn't do something be the reasons you don't do something. All the reasons why things are the way they are be the reasons why they should stay the way they are. Like, each one of us has the power to change the world, truly. And the main thing is to realize we're not in it alone. So if you remember to do your part, and when your CEO or your co-founder or your investor tells you, no, we shouldn't be doing this, we don't have the money for it, it's your chance to stand up for what's right. Everyone inside of us knows what the right thing to do is, and it takes the courage to live it. And I just believe that we can live it if you stay hopeful and believe in yourselves.
Inspiring words. And I love the emphasis on, the fact that we're not doing it alone as well. That's something that, we're really trying to cultivate within this community to help people realize that there's thousands of you around the world that are all trying to move in this more humane direction. And also that building community and supporting one another is a critical part of us all being successful. And that it's a reminder that we're intervening at different points. Like, some of us are working within major platforms. Some of us are working on the policy and regulatory frameworks. Some of us are, doing big picture systems thinking, trying to reinvent the way that we, like our entire economies. And all of that is collectively moving in the right direction. So I think that's a great reminder. All right, final quick question for you.
Yeah.
Are there any ways that this Foundation's course community can be supporting Marco Polo and supporting your work, or anything else that you're trying to build beyond Marco
Polo? Thanks for asking. That's really nice. One thing I said, we are hiring, so please go to our jobs page, and we're hiring across the board. And even if you don't see a job for you, please reach out, because we'd love to. jobs@marcopolo.me. We would love to hear from you and sort of like build out a list of folks who are interested in working with us and interested in the vision that we see in the world. So that would be a really awesome way. The other way is we just launched a new feature, or a new way to connect on Marco Polo, that's called Sharecast. And it's a way for you to connect your entire world with just one Polo. So whether it's like a quick share, or if you want to be teaching a course, check out Marco Polo Sharecast. Oh, thanks, Kellen, for that link. And then
job links. That's like that's you're helping us as much as they might be helping you there.
Awesome. And follow me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. Later this summer, I'll be starting a newsletter where I'll be sharing some of my thoughts on the industry and ways that we can be doing more in the world, more good in the world together. So just follow me on LinkedIn and stay tuned for the newsletter.
I'm pulling up your LinkedIn now so that I can try to link all or have all these links top of or easily accessible for folks. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
I dropped the jobs, I dropped the Sharecast details, and I dropped your LinkedIn profile. So perfect. Those sound like
Thank
they're mutually or they're complementary. What's the word? Mutually beneficial. So hopefully,
yeah, perfect.
All the way into the course community. So that's great. All right. Let's go through some of these questions. This is an anonymous question that came in, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but how did you manage to grow an ethical app to a sustainable market level without exploitation tactics in a saturation market full of businesses that are using them? You know, we kind of talked about this earlier, but I think we kind of glossed over it, so I'm glad it's coming back up. You're not running ads. It's a free app, at least for the majority of users or those who are coming in. How did you actually make that grow and be sustainable and financially viable when all these other companies are trying to maximize engagement or measuring time on site and using that to attract investors?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Such a good and important question. So yeah, all of our growth has been word of mouth and viral. We have not done any paid advertising because I also have some questions about how to do that in an ethical way. So for us, there is a benefit to Marco Polo that to use Marco Polo to fully realize the value of it, you have to have another person. So there's a natural reason to ask somebody to install Marco Polo if you want to use it with them.
That's a good point. Design a model that that requires other users or requires you to recruit other users. Your users are your marketers, right?
Exactly. And so for us, what we've seen is like if we can get people realize the value of Marco Polo, then they often become our best advocates. And usually we actually have a really hard time with them just like, hey, you should install this app because nobody wants to install another app. Right. But because the Marco Polo community is such advocates of what we're trying to do, they'll often be like, no, you don't understand. And they'll just take the phone and install the phone, connect, and then like almost force the person to use it with them. And then they'll see the benefit of it. So, and then the other like maybe more tactical tip is the way growth works is the time to virality is really important to the extent that your products that you're working on require the people sort of like bring it up earlier in the onboarding flow and asking people to like letting them know that the way to get value from this product is by having more people using it with you. And so therefore, please invite these people. We'll help you with your growth and virality.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. I really hadn't thought about approaching it from that standpoint, but that totally makes sense. You got your users who are your evangelists for you. So they're if you build a quality product that they really align with and that makes them happy or makes them feel good, then chances are you're gonna get them to recruit for you.
But you have to remember to ask, because actually for the first little while we didn't ask, and we were doing user testing, like user research through onboarding. And I'd always ask like, what do you expect in the next step? But people would be like, I'd expect to be inviting people. And we didn't have that in the flow. We're like, oh, we should add that.
It's a great point to bring it back to the iterative user feedback as well, right? That you have to be finding out what's actually resonating with your users constantly along the journey, and hopefully inviting them into the development process like that as well.
Yeah.
Great. Let's go to this next question from Saparna Chiver. What are your topmost KPIs to track happiness, and are they qualitative or even quantitative? So we kind of talked earlier about like the research study that you did, but are there additional ongoing KPIs that you're measuring to track happiness?
That's the main way that we're doing it right now. Okay. And and as we get bigger and have more funding, I'd like to expand it to like measure things like cortisol levels and like, actually get more. So it's not just people self-reporting, but that takes a lot of money.
And I'm sure there's some humane or questions about accessing user health data and things like that too. That could be
it will be voluntary,
right?
Yeah, that's right. So like we have to figure that, but for now it's through this research that we're doing. We also do the NPS scores for our user base, but I think that's different.
Got it. Yeah, I assume you're still using like a lot of more traditional tech metrics as well, in addition to just like you're not only measuring happiness. That's not your only measure.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Like we measure monthly active users, daily active users, our, all the bookings, like all the typical stuff we still measure. And we do spend a ton on user research. Like I'm a huge believer in user research. So at any given moment, there's a handful of studies trying to understand some aspect of our community. Gotcha. And so sort of indirectly we're learning the kind of impact we're having on people as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think this whole idea of trying to measure things that are, or create new metrics that are more aligned with, humane technology principles is challenging, but really fascinating. Maybe we can facilitate some other conversations explicitly about that within our course community, because I'd love to hear what other folks maybe have come up with in terms of measuring things beyond growth and engagement. We talk in the course a little bit about anti-KPIs as well. Like, okay, you have your more traditional KPIs, but are there KPIs where you can measure something where you knew if X happened that you would be successful, but you wouldn't be aligned with your values, for instance, and what would those look like? So it's sort of like a reverse engineering of measuring the values that you actually want to see. So,
like actually a great example, like we don't measure time in the app because we specifically don't want people to spend as much of their time as possible on Marco Polo. We don't want people to mindlessly be scrolling and just like getting people hooked. Like we want people to be there, get their heart filled, and then leave and go on, enjoy beautiful day outside,
Yeah.
So,
and that's interesting that you made the choice to explicitly not measure it. Because on the one hand, I can see not measuring it being like, okay, we're not even going to know, we're not going to be tempted to try to maximize that. We're not going to, like, an investor isn't going to try and push us in that way. But on the flip side, if you were measuring it, and you saw that it was growing too much, then maybe you could figure out some design tweaks to ratchet it down. That's a tricky thing to balance, I can imagine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, I feel like we could go down some rabbit holes about metrics, but we'll pause there for now. Let's see. There's this is an interesting one. Why'd you call him Marco Polo?
Oh, it's a good question. It's so hard to name things
that haven't already been named too, probably, right?
It usually involves me, my husband and I walking down the streets for hours and just like brainstorming together. And Marco Polo came up. I don't even remember. I think I don't remember how we came up with it, but basically the reason we like this so much is somebody says something, somebody responds. It's not a monologue that one person is just talking to the ethos. It's expected that there's a conversation going back and forth. We also, once we like that name, we did some research, of course, to understand like, okay, what associations people have with Marco Polo. And it's usually fun, summer, being with your friends.
Yes.
And that's what we want it to feel like. We want it to feel like, oh my gosh, I get to be with my friends again and feel the love from them in a way that I'm not able anywhere else.
I love this. And for those who weren't born and raised in America, I don't know if this game is international or not, but here in the US, at least, there's a game called Marco Polo that you play in the swimming pool where one person closes their eyes and the other people are spread around the swimming pool, and you close your eyes and you say Marco, and then they respond Polo, and then you try to go find them and you go back and forth saying Marco Polo until you find them. So yeah, that association with a back and forth conversation and also with fun, happiness totally resonates with me. I'm not thinking about the explorer when I'm hearing Polo. I'm thinking about that swimming pool game from my childhood. So that's great.
And hopefully it brings back positive memories.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully no one had traumatic experiences with Marco Polo at a pool. Yeah. All right, I'm scanning through a few other questions here. This is a good one. When you have millions of users, how do you monitor the platform for abusive activity, like threats or other harmful actions to unsuspecting Marco Polo users? And then if a user is like reporting abuse, how are you mitigating that? How are you helping them? And how do you react to that?
Yeah, so there's a few ways that we do that. Marco Polo fundamentally is a private system. So it's not even like, it's not just that it's not a social network in a way that you can go and follow people, but you can like search for people. Like if I knew that you were on it, I couldn't just like search, find you and then add you. So it's a very private, sometimes I say it's a closed system in a way. And so that by itself already reduces any kind of harmful activity that might happen on a platform.
So again, in those features proactively from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. Like we didn't want to have a directory where you could just find people because we didn't want to increase the chances. Like, I'm thinking about like my family's using this. So I always have that filter as we're thinking like, what are we adding to Marco Polo? So the fact that it's a closed system really decreases that risk quite substantially. We've had apps in it before that didn't have that, and there was a lot more activity on it that was that need to be monitored. And then we also have a way for you to report a problem. So if somebody is, or to flag this as inappropriate content. So if somebody is saying something inappropriate, you do have a way to let us know. And we have a whole process set up that triggers, our lawyer, like legal systems and reviews, and then communication with the person. And eventually, if the person is not stopping what they're doing, we do take them out of the system. And then there's also ways that you can block people. So if you no longer want to be talking to somebody, you don't just delete, you can actually block them so they can't get a hold of you.
Gotcha. And you mentioned earlier that you only have a team of 50, and you have, how many users do you have around the world now?
We actually don't share the numbers, but it's millions of people who are using Marco Polo.
We'll leave it at millions. So that's fine. It's a big order of magnitude difference between 50 employees and millions of users. Have you found that it's difficult to keep up with the level of problematic activity on the app, or because of those proactive features that you've built in, is it feel more manageable?
I'm feeling like I'm going to jinx something. So I'm going to be knocking on my head, and any wood that I find, please knock if you're listening. So far, it's been fine. Again, because we're such a closed system, it really takes out like vast majority of issues. And the things that do come up, we're able to handle quite quickly.
Yeah, that's
and the other thing is, let me just add, it's not just that it's private, but also the ethos of Marco Polo. It's about talking to your friends and family. It's not about following strangers, and it's not about and it's on video. So it's the connection, like it's harder to be mean to somebody when you're looking at yourself, and when you're seeing their face. It's like a different experience.
It's not you're not in an anonymous chat or putting in anonymous comments under a pseudonym, right?
Exactly.
Or whatever. Yeah.
And you're looking at yourself as you're saying this. So like try saying something really horrible to somebody while you're seeing yourself and their face. It's just like it's much harder to do that. So as a result, we don't experience it very much at all.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting to think. I think sometimes we associate scale with greater harm, and not to say that there isn't some unintended consequences from Marco Polo, but just to think about, again, going back to building in those proactive features and really thinking from the get-go and iterating over time based on feedback. But like, what do we want that user experience to be? What are we trying to prevent? What are we explicitly for and against? It sounds like it's been a lot easier for you to regulate that and ensure a positive experience on your app because of that foresight, as opposed to growing and then having to reel it back in with by investing in moderator teams down the line or something once you realize that problematic activity was occurring.
And also, like, we follow all the standards, like GDPR. We apply that to all of our community, not just folks in Europe. Like, so think like we really do take this stuff very seriously, and because again, I think it's so crucial to what we're trying to do in the world. That's
great. That question was from Dave Fleming, by the way. Shout out to you. Thanks, Dave. All right, let's see a few more. Well, it sounds like you already answered this one. What if folks are looking to get in touch or wanting to learn more? It sounds like either applying for jobs at Marco Polo or following you on LinkedIn are probably the best ways to do that. Is that correct for now, or is there other ways that you'd like for if people wanted to have additional conversations or follow up? Is that something you'd be open to, or how would?
Absolutely, yeah. LinkedIn is the best way for sure.
Great. And I put that in the chat earlier. I can I'll copy paste it again here just in case for folks. But
and if you're interested in jobs at marcopolo.me would be the best way to follow up there.
Great. I'm going to look through and see if there's any more highly.
I would love to, maybe as you're doing that, I would love to ask the community, just because as I am going to be launching this newsletter, I would love to know like what kind of things you'd want me to be talking about.
Great. Yeah. Start throwing some of those in the chat, please.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Hear Vlada chat more about. This one, I'm going to save that one for later.
Uh-oh.
No, just because it's an inspiring one to end on, not because it's not saving the hardest for last year. Don't worry. Let's see here. Oh, are you able to share who your investors are?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's an easy way to hear about where to find investors from another app that we believe in and support. So yeah, please.
Yeah, I'll share a few of them. Cool. So we have Roger Lee from Battery.
Okay.
We have Jeff from Uncork Capital. We have Anthony from Altos. We have Bill from Altos VC. We have Bill Gurley from Benchmark. We have Josh Hanna from Matrix. Yeah, so those are just some of the names.
Great. I tried to capture a few of those and put them in the chat here, but yeah, great to start that list for folks. Thank you. Let's see here. We're coming up on time here. This one was already mostly answered. Maybe we'll have time for 2 more, but we already talked about advice to startups for surviving in the current market cycle. I think we talked about, how you have to sort of be in it for a different reason and be a bit more patient. Is there any other advice you'd give for other fellow startups that are trying to get started? I mean, you started 10 years ago, now you're more robust. Do things feel different now, or is there advice, or are there things that you would do differently if you were starting today than if you were starting 10 years ago?
That's an interesting question. It's hard to say because so much has changed. I'm sure there'll be something different. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that we did that I would not change is just how intentional we are about our investors. Actually, the first round we ever raised was from our friends.
Typical, right? Yeah.
And it was just enough to prove out a concept. So we always took enough money to prove out the next stage.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something like in the market as it is right now. That's probably something to change. Never regret it, taking more money if you can. Even if it means more dilution to yourself, or even if it means maybe the terms are not as quite as perfect. But if you're really in it for the long term, having the funding is pretty critical. Yeah. So if you can be lenient on that, I think that would be of great benefit to you.
Great. And that was from Faison. Thank you, Faison. All right, this is the last question I wanted to say for you. I feel like this is a good one to wrap up on. This is from Allie Fleming. What gets you up in the morning and what keeps you up at night?
Ooh. Thanks.
And we know that it's probably your children that get you up in the morning.
Yeah.
Yours are older now. Mine are still young. They're the ones getting me up in the morning. But
my kids still do that. And they also keep me up at night.
Yeah. Fair.
As they get older, it's more about keeping me up at night than waking up in the morning.
Yeah. I'm fearing the extension of that early bedtime that I get to enjoy for my kids still. So.
Oh yeah. Savor it. The thing that gets me up in the morning is my passion for changing the world. I really think that we have to do that for the next generation. I think that technology is magical. I really do. And what's happened so far, it got away from us. And I look at the world and what's happening around us and the way people talk about big tech as this evil thing. And that's not what technology was meant to be. That's not what it was meant to do. And I'm just not one of those people who's just going to sit back and be like, oh, that's a typical problem to solve. I feel called to make a change. I know I'm saying this, I'm like, oh my God, it sounds so cheesy, but I'm just so cold. I'm so called to make a difference in this world and to help inspire and all of you, and to help put our arms together and say enough. We have to do better for ourselves, to heal our bodies and our minds, for our next generation. Technology is magic. How do we bring that back? So for me, that's what it's all about. I'm feeling a little emotional, but thanks for that question.
It would be corny if it didn't feel so genuine coming from you. You can see how it is in you to your core. And I love the focus on techno-optimism as opposed to techno-solutionism. I think there's a difference between the two, and you keeping your eyes on that optimistic lens of, how can we shift this? How can we pivot it? How can we bring it back to what, the things that technology can do to actually make our world better is very inspiring. Well,
thank you. And the thing that keeps you up at night besides recruiting.
Yeah, let's end on a pessimistic note. This is good. Okay. Maybe optimism keeps you up at night too, right?
Actually, recruiting is a tactical thing that keeps you up at night, is figuring out how we get the right people. But the thing that keeps me up at night is, we're still a small company. We're not a Facebook or a Google, and I'm playing a game with giants.
Yeah.
And so how do I make sure we don't get squandered? Yeah. How do I make sure that my voice, our community's voice gets heard, even though it's millions of people, not billions of people? And so figuring that out is really something that keeps me up at night. And just if you give me another minute, like this thing that's happening in Ukraine, the war, is actually quite relevant to the experience I'm experiencing right now, and sort of like this fight that I'm in. Because when the war started, I was sobbing. You know, for me, I remember when Ukraine was about to get its independence and the announcements, all the stuff, and I went to like, as soon as I heard the war started, I was like, oh man, tomorrow it's gonna be all over. And just like this thought of this one man can just destroy the hopes of all these people, but they fought. And they're still fighting. And it was unimaginable to me that could happen, that they could push back as much as they did, and they could fight for as long as they did. And look what's happening around them. Look how the West has rallied together. And so the parallel to me is like, I don't know how this is going to end. I don't know if we're ultimately going to be successful in changing the whole tech industry and creating more magic for us and for the next generation, more healthiness for everyone. But if we just can stay in this fight long enough, like hopefully we can help inspire more unity. That's why I talk about the community so much, because we can't do this alone. Yeah. I need like all of you to join in into this, like, I don't know, army of love or something like that, you know, to do more. Together we can do more. Together we're not just like, you know, it's not 1 on 1 equals 2. It's like 1 on 1 equals 1,000 or something. So yeah, so I think about that quite a lot.
Well, if this conversation today is any indication, I think you are well on your way to building Vlada's Army of Love. I think I'll rebrand the course community under that title. That sounds great.
Thanks.
That deeply resonates. And I think you're right, that the only way that we are going to win the humane technology battle, if you will, is by working together in a global community, all rowing in the same direction. And I think, you know, Marco Polo and Vlada, now you're at the front holding the battle flag, or waving the battle flag, if you will. But you know, between the folks here, the broader folks in our course community, the folks who hopefully will see this on YouTube, and the message that we can keep collectively spreading, I feel optimistic and feel like we're going in the right direction. So thank you. And
I have to say, I don't have to be in the front. I love the idea of all of us together.
Well, yes. I'm trying to imagine. We've got tiered staging. We're all, yeah. Everyone is visible. I love that.
That's right.
That's the decentralized type of vision that feels more communal, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen a lot of hearts, a lot of applause, a lot of enthusiastic emojis coming in. Too much for me to monitor in the chat in real time, but Vlada, this has just been a pleasure and an inspiration, and I love starting the day on a high note like this on the West Coast, at least. I know some folks are all around the world, but thank you so much to you and to all the folks in the audience who have been engaged today and posed some really great questions. This has just been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for including me, and thank you to all of you on the call. Like, really, you guys have all a role to play. Just even by showing up here, you're already part of this. And I'm just so excited to be joining hands in hands with all of you to make this a better place for us and for our kids and for everyone.